You know what I like? Yu-Gi-Oh! You know what else I like? Fairy Tail. I even made a video about it. Go check it out. Could always use more views. So, since it's the holiday season, I've got some free time on my hands, and I decided to do something dangerous with it. I started to think. And one of the thoughts that came to my head was, what if Fairy Tail characters played Yu-Gi-Oh? Like, picture this. Remember in Fairy Tail when they get transported to Edolas, and more recently in Elantir in the 100-Year Quest manga? What if they somehow get transported to the world of Yu-Gi-Oh like that? And like in Edolas, they can't use magic, so they have to solve all their problems by playing card games, like everyone else in Yu-Gi-Oh! If that hypothetical situation were to happen, what decks would the Fairy Tail characters play? And I thought long and hard about this. Really, I spent an embarrassing amount of time thinking about it. But all that time paid off. And after days and weeks of pondering which deck in a children's card game would a bunch of fictional characters from a cartoon play, I finally found the answers. And it's time to share this amazing breakthrough with the rest of the world. But before we get to the results of this totally scientific research, just a few clarifications. First, I based the choice of decks primarily on the type of magic the characters use. Second, given the enormous size of Fairy Tail's character roster, for now I'll be focusing only on the Dragon Slayers, Team Natsu, and the big bad himself, Zeref. I'll probably get to the other characters later, but for now this will do. Third, I'll be showing the deck lists and gameplay of the decks I mention. And fourth, if you're a Yu-Gi-Oh player and see some misplays in the replays I'm about to show, keep in mind, I literally played some of these decks for the first time then, so go easy on the criticism. So, without further ado, let's get into it. First, the Dragon Slayers. I was thinking it would be appropriate for them to use a deck that centers around a Dragon-type boss monster based on the respective Dragon Slayer's element. So starting with Natsu, the main character of the show, I think a good fit for him would be a Red Dragon Archfiend deck. It's a deck that was featured in the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, piloted by Jack Atlas, aka The King, aka the best character in Arc V. The focus of this deck is to synchro summon level 8 or higher Dark Dragon monsters with big attack numbers. And even though they are Dark attribute, they are associated with fire. That's why they are called Red Dragon Archfiend. And their effects are based on disrupting your opponent and destroying their monster, which I think is a great fit for Natsu given his tendency to destroy things. The main deck monsters are mostly Fiend types, which is also a good fit for Natsu, seeing as, spoiler alert, he's also a demon. So yeah, given all that, I think the Red Dragon Archfiend deck would be a perfect fit for Natsu. So I wanted to showcase this duel because it shows everything a Red Dragon Archfiend deck is capable of in one single duel. It has all the basic combos, all the important boss monsters appear, and I even managed to summon Red Supernova Dragon, the newest boss monster of the deck. Considering it specifically needs 3 tuners and a synchro monster to summon, that's no small feat. But yeah, this game was a total grind. Both me and my opponent had answers for each other's actions, and we managed to recover most of our resources, so it took quite a while before the duel was finished. But in the end I still managed to finish on top. I sped up the footage to double the speed, otherwise it would drag on too long. I'm probably gonna do it to most of the replays I show in this video, so as to not prolong it more than necessary. So if you want a more detailed look of the gameplay, just slow down the video replay speed to a double. Now, moving on to Gajeel, the Iron Dragon Slayer. For him, I picked the Cyber Dragon deck. And yeah, I know, they're technically not dragons, they're machines. But since my only other option was to base a deck solely on Iron Dragon Tiamaton, which I really didn't want to do, I thought this would be the next best thing, so yeah. And besides, they look like dragons, they're made of iron, so yeah, I think it's a good fit. And just like our previous entry, it's a fan favorite archetype featured in the anime. There's gonna be a few more of those. Piloted by Zane Truesdale, or Ryo Marufuji for all you sub-watchers, aka Kaiser. Man, what is with Yu-Gi-Oh! And all those royal titles for nicknames? Anyway, Cyber Dragons are mostly known for their OTK potential, which goes well with Gajeel's brute force approach to things. And this duel showcases exactly that. I managed to establish enough board presence and even got rid of one of my opponent's monsters before even entering the battle phase, so I had lethal damage on board which left my opponent with no other options but to scoop. Hey, a small edit here. So, me being a dumbass, I totally forgot scraps are a thing. They are an archetype themed around monsters that are built from scrap iron. So given Gajeel's rugged personality, and the fact we often see him munching on pieces of scrap iron in the show, I'd say this is probably a better fit for Gajeel than Cyber Dragons. And they even have a dragon-type boss monster. But even if we stick with the Cyber Dragon analogy, there's a nice parallel between Gajeel's and Zane's character arc, it's just reversed. So when Gajeel is introduced at the start of the show as an antagonist, he could be playing Cyber Darks, and then later when he joins Fairy Tail he could switch to Cyber Dragons. So while they are both a good fit, I'd say scraps are probably a better one. Here in this duel you can see just how much mutual destruction scraps do, and the insane pluses you get from it. And I even managed to summon Scrap Twin Dragon, one of their 2 dragon type boss monsters. It's a pretty good boss monster that can return 2 of your opponent's cards to the hand and trigger the effects of your scrap monsters. Moving on to Wendy, we have Dragoonity as my deck of choice for her. I was debating between Speedroids and Dragoonity for Wendy, because they both have wind attribute dragon type synchro monsters as their boss monsters. But I ultimately went with Dragoonity, because Wendy is an enhancer who focuses on supporting others in battle. So I thought it'd be fitting to give her a deck that focuses on equipping cards to their monsters. Plus, the artwork of the Synchro Dragoonity monsters features dragons with some winged creatures riding them, which reminded me of Wendy and just with the roles reversed. Here you can see how easily Dragoonity can synchro climb using the equip mechanic. It does take a lot of summoning in one turn, but if you're afraid of Nibiru coming down, you can easily get to Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon in 5 summons, which is a hard counter to Nibiru. You can probably do much more than I did in this duel, but I'm not really familiar with Dragoonity, so this is the best that I could do. But it turns out this time it was enough. Next we have the Lightning Dragon Slayer Laxus. And this was a no-brainer, he would play Thunder Dragons. Was there ever such a perfect fit for a crossover? I really don't have much to say here, just that this is another situation like with Gajeel, where they're not actually Dragon type, but Thunder type. But other than that, it's a perfect fit. And also, it's fitting that one of the most powerful characters in the show would get a deck that was tier 1 at one point in the actual game. In this replay, you can see just how easy it is to get Thunder Dragon Colossus on the field even through multiple disruptions. And with his protection and his not once per turn destruction effect, you can just keep destroying your opponent's card as long as you have Thunder Dragons that can activate their effects in your hand. So it's really no surprise it was once a top tier strategy. Coming up next we have, in my opinion, the coolest Dragon Slayer, Cobra. At first I thought maybe he should play Venoms, but then I was like, wait a minute, they don't have a dragon monster in the deck. But wait a minute, Venom? Dragon? Starwing Venom Fusion Dragon! And what deck was made to turbo out that dragon? Well, of course, it's Predaplant. Predaplant is one of those decks from the anime that was played by this little Psycho, and it revolves around summoning dark plant monsters that can give your opponent's monster predator counters, and you can use those monsters for your fusion summons even though you don't control them. I'd say that translates what poisoning your enemy feels like pretty good into a game mechanic. Now, in this duel, I did put a Predator counter on one of my opponent's monsters, and I could have used it as fusion material for starving Venom Fusion Dragon using Lamido Sandu's effect, but I opted to go for greedy Venom Fusion Dragon, because if he is destroyed, he can wipe the whole field clear of monsters. And I had a Super Polymerization in hand, so if my opponent summoned a Dark monster, which most of the strong monsters in the game are, I could use it for a fusion summon the next turn. And that's exactly what happened. So everything worked out in the end. Moving on to Sting and Rogue, the twin dragon slayers of Sabertooth. First we'll cover Sting. Sting is a white dragon slayer whose element is apparently holiness. I don't know how that works, but what a coincidence that Konami just recently announced a new archetype in one of the upcoming sets called Holy Knight. It's a deck whose boss monster is a level 7 light attribute dragon type monster called Radiant Seiyaryu, or Holy Knight Dragon. So yeah, this is also a Laxus situation with perfect crossover potential. The deck focuses mostly on disrupting your opponent's play by special summoning the said Seiyaryu monster, triggering its effect to destroy a card your opponent controls, returning it back to the hand, and special summoning it again with a card effect so you can disrupt your opponent by destroying one of their cards again. This reminds me of the time Sting fought Natsu in the Grand Magic Games. After getting beaten up, he came back with not one, but 2 separate power-ups. Of course, he still lost in the end, but hey. Here you can see how you can trigger Radiant Seiyaryu's destruction effect multiple times in a turn. With the archetype having a monster, a spell, and 2 traps that can do that during either player's turn, it's really not a problem. They even have a monster that searches those spells and traps, and a spell that searches that monster. And Radiant Seiyaryu also has a battle effect, which allows you to banish the opponent's monster you are attacking until the end of the turn and attack again, which can circumvent the effects of your opponent's monster that activate in the graveyard. Moving on, we have Rogue, the Shadow Dragon Slayer. Now, this was kind of a tough choice because a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh decks feature dark dragons in them, but I don't think any Yu-Gi-Oh deck invokes the imagery of shadows quite like Layer of Darkness. I mean, just look at those creepy, wiggly shadow things. And yeah, it has a dragon boss monster. Say hello to Darkus Diabolus, Lord of the Lair. God, that sounds edgy. So yeah, it's a perfect fit for Rogue. The deck itself focuses on tributing monsters to activate different effects, whether it's returning a card from your opponent's hand back to the deck or setting trap cards, which then can tribute other monsters to activate different effects. And the titular field spell allows you to tribute your opponent's monsters instead of your own, which is reminiscent of Rogue's ability to have Shadow swallow his enemies. In this duel you can see just how much tributing goes on in this deck. And like I said, the field spell allows you to tribute your opponent's monsters, and since you have traps and a monster with a quick effect that tribute for cost, you can easily do it during your opponent's turn. But if you have Darkus Diabolus in your hand or graveyard when you tribute one of your own monsters, you can special summon him. And since the field spell also makes your opponent's monster's dark attribute, Super Polymerization and Starving Venom Fusion Dragon are good tech options in the deck. And now we've come to the meanest, baddest Dragon Slayer of them all, the Dragon of Darkness himself, Acnologia. Now, we don't really know what Acnologia's element is, but he can consume all forms of magic. That's why I thought a deck with a hefty dose of spellcasters with a dragon as their boss monster would be perfect for him. Lucky for us, Yu-Gi-Oh has just that deck in the form of Supreme King Zark Turbo. And it also fits Acnologia's moniker as the King of Dragons. The deck basically wants to get to the different spellcaster type magician monsters that are considered as different types of extra deck dragon type monsters, and can then be fused into the Supreme King Zark himself. And with a name like that, it's gotta be strong, right? Well, let us see together what this baby can do. It's a level 12, 4000 attack and defense, dark dragon type fusion pendulum monster whose effect reads: must be fusion summoned. If this card is special summoned, destroy all cards your opponent controls. Cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. Your opponent cannot target this card with card effects. When this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, You can special summon one Supreme King Dragon monster from your deck or extra deck. If this card in the monster zone is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can place this card in your Pendulum zone. And its Pendulum effect, Fusion, Synchro and Xyz monsters your opponent controls cannot activate their effects. Once per turn, when a card is added from the main deck to your opponent's hand except during the draw phase or the damage step, you can destroy that card. So yeah, a pretty strong card. It was also featured in the anime and it took people from 4 different dimensions to take it down. It's a long story. Now, lastly for the Dragon Slayers, we still have God Serena. Now, he's a bit of a strange case, but not because choosing a deck for him was difficult. It was pretty easy actually. He's a Dragon Slayer with multiple elements, featuring all the traditional elements like fire, wind, water and earth. And there is a deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! That has multiple Dragon-type boss monsters with the corresponding elements in it. That deck is the Dragon Rulers. And this is the only deck here that I don't have the deck list or gameplay of. There are 2 reasons for that. First, all of the aforementioned Dragon Rulers are banned in the game, except for one, which is limited, so playing the deck is illegal. And second, even if I tried playing a casual game with no ban list with the deck, I'm too stupid to play it. Seriously, I have no idea how the deck works. So yeah, that's it for the Dragon Slayers. Now let's move on to Team Natsu. Let's start with the strongest member of the team, Erza. She uses magic that lets her change between magical weapons and armor sets called the Knight. And she's also a fiery redhead, so I think a good fit for her would be the Infernoble Knights deck. It's a deck that focuses on fire warrior type monsters and they support themselves with equip spell cards that give them additional effects. And they were also one of the top decks in the recent format, so I think it fits with Erza seeing as she is also one of the strongest characters in the show. In this duel, I go through all the basic Infernoble Knights combos, utilizing the various engines that were used in the metagame. So I go to Isolde, special summon Gamba, then go into Crystal Needle Fiber, special summon Deskbolt 01, go into Aurora Dawn, get 3 tokens, which triggers 01's effect in the graveyard to special summon himself, then go into Power Tomb Dragon to search an equip spell, and so on and so on. Eventually I managed to put 2 negates on the board, in the form of Boronlord Savage Dragon and Phoenix Gearfried. Maybe I could have done more, but since I'm playing against Madonche, which is a deck I'm familiar with, I could use those 2 negates effectively and it won me the game. Next we have Grey, and I'd also like to throw in Ur and Leon here as well, seeing as they use the same magic. And seeing how Grey and Leon learned magic from Ur, if she was training them in Yu-Gi-Oh! Instead of magic, I can see them playing the same deck as her, maybe just different builds. And this was also a no-brainer. For them, I've chosen the most well-known ice-themed deck in the game, and that is Ice Barriers. Now, they don't really have a central strategy, but with the recent new support they've received, they can go more easily into their synchro plays and have some other options as well. Namely to overlay 2 Level Force into Bahamut Shark, which then special summons Totally Awesome. Yes, that's a real card name. Now, I wanted to showcase this duel because it's between Ice Barriers and Neospatians, 2 decks that were considered one of, if not the worst decks of all time. But then they both got support, which improved the decks a little bit. Neospatians can now easily go into their fusion monsters, and Ice Barriers can more easily go into their synchro. But they both still don't have a clear win condition. But anyway, let us see who finishes on top in this battle of the worst. And for the final member of Team Natsu, we have Lucy. Yes, I'm not counting Happy. So Lucy's magic is summoning spirits that are based on different constellations to act on her behalf, with the strongest of the spirits being based on the 12 signs of the zodiac. So at first, I was thinking she could use a zodiac deck, but they are based on the Chinese zodiac, so it wouldn't really fit the vibe. And then I remembered, there is a Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck based on the 12 constellations of the zodiac, and that is the Constellar deck, who's also featured in the anime, piloted by this guy, who doesn't even try to hide what he's playing. I mean, just look at his head, there's a constellation on it. If that doesn't scream, I'm a Constellar player, I don't know what does. But anyway, the Constellar deck is centered around summoning a bunch of monsters that can alter their levels and go into various Xyz plays. And they have Constellar Pleiades at their disposal, which is one of the best rank 5 Xyz monsters in the game. He's able to, during either player's turn, return a card on the field to the owner's hand, and non-destruction removal is a pretty strong thing in the game, considering it avoids any effect that activates in the graveyard. But it's also important to know when to use that effect. Like in this duel against my Akashi. I could have shotgunned the effect on the first big monster my opponent summoned, but then I couldn't stop his unizombie plays. So remember kids, always wait.
Until the opportune moment.
But if one monster that returns cards to the hand isn't enough for you, they have two. There's also Constellar Ptolemy M7, and he can also be summoned by using Pleiades without overlay materials that you don't have much use for anymore. It's just a shame that he can't activate his effect the turn he is summoned that way. But I guess otherwise he'd just be too good. But like you see in this replay, if you have two Constellar Cows that increase each other's level by 2, you can just hard summon him using 2 level 6s, and then you're free to use his effect on the same turn. And finally, for now, we have Zeref, aka the strongest black mage in the fairy tale world. And is there a better fit for him than the ace monster of the king of games himself, Dark Magician, who is the ultimate wizard in terms of attack and defense. At first I was considering other decks for Zeref, but then an epiphany hit me. I had totally forgotten about Dark Magician, but when I remembered him, it was an instant fit for Zeref. Dark Magician's original name is even Black Magician, which fits well with Zeref's theme of being the most powerful black mage. Now, the reason I'm showing this Dark Magician replay as opposed to any other isn't because of the edge of your seat back and forth gameplay, or an anime level hard of the cards top deck moment and comeback play. No, it's because I managed to summon all 3 Dark Magicians and swing with them for game. It may be a silly reason, but I think it's kinda neat, so that's why I wanted to showcase it. So anyway, that's it for now. This was a really fun project to do, and I think that mashing Yu-Gi-Oh! And Fairy Tail together works surprisingly well. After all, Fairy Tail has so many different kinds of magic. And Yu-Gi-Oh! In its 20 years run has had so many different decks, so it's no surprise that you can correlate one with the other so easily. And this is something that wouldn't work on shows that have less variety in their power system. Shows like Dragon Ball, Naruto, and World Trigger wouldn't really work in this crossover scenario I've imagined, but Fairy Tail was just perfect for this kind of thought experiment. And I'll probably make another video about other Fairy Tail characters and their Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks. So until then, bye!